Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Flashback to 2003. The only thing I knew about video games was that my older brother played them, with me staring over his shoulder. The last game I remember watching him play was Final Fantasy VII on the PC, and being so annoyed that he was just not doing it right. But then, just before Christmas, an ad came on television. All I remember about the ad was that it ended with the words Kingdom Hearts. Straight up, I did not see any context of the game. Just a boy, a key, and the words. Next time I was in a big box store, I begged my mom to buy me a PlayStation 2, as well as this mysterious game. She had no idea what it was about. I had no idea what it was about. I didn't even realize Disney was in it until I picked up the case on Christmas morning and read the back. From the very opening lines of Simple and Clean and the opening cinematic, I was hooked. I'm sure you've heard the story of Kingdom Hearts. If not the actual story, then all the jokes and memes about how impossible the story is to describe. I love this series, let me put that out there. But to me, Kingdom Hearts 1 did story best. It has some of the best story beats, character arcs, incredible music, and it's fun. It's just such a delightful time to play as a boy with too big of shoes, fighting alongside Goofy and Donald in Disney World with a giant key. As I summed up Kingdom Hearts to my friends, who constantly begged me to stop talking about it, Kingdom Hearts is a story about a boy who wanted to hang out with his friends, and when things got tough, kept fighting for them. Within Sora, we have a sweet child who's willing to do anything to make sure his friends are okay, and he's so kind. When I was a 12-year-old playing this game, everyone thought Riku was the cute one. But in a world of video game and movie protagonists that are so badass, cold, and sometimes mean, Sora's first instinct to be kind really stood out to me, and still does almost 20 years later. But wow, Riku's character arc throughout the series is incredible, but throughout Kingdom Hearts is the one I reference in discussing good character. He starts as incredibly pompous and over everyone. All he wants to do is discover the world outside his island, but when he's given the opportunity to do so, he accidentally makes things kind of worse. He works his butt off to find his friends, only to discover that Sora has already found new friends. And from then on, Riku proceeds to go darker and darker, like kidnapping princesses and almost whisking a puppet off to his death, because he has one goal, and that's to save Kairi. He loses sight of why he's trying to be strong and ends up being possessed by Ansem, but even possessed, he still manages to protect his friends, and is willing to be stuck behind Kingdom Hearts in order to save the world. Kingdom Hearts the door, not the moon. That didn't come until Kingdom Hearts 2. Sora and Riku are so beautifully two sides of the same coin. And what's also nice is that they're just kids and they act like it. They both want adventure, but in Kingdom Hearts 1, what they're willing to do for it was drastically different. Riku was willing to sacrifice anyone in order to protect Kairi, and he learns quickly that he messed up bad, and puts himself in a situation where he can't do much. Meanwhile, Sora was so willing to put himself on the line for literally everyone he met, Disney, Final Fantasy, original character, you name it. And when it really counted, he was willing to sacrifice himself to bring Kairi back. They both grow so much by the end, with Riku sacrificing himself and Sora having to make the hard decision to allow Riku to do so. Ugh. It was so fascinating because when I first played this game at a mere 12 years old, Riku was just mean, while Sora was fun. But once you hit those angsty teen years, so much about Riku's perspective makes sense. I too wanted to get away from my hometown, and if someone offered me dark powers and/or I had to kidnap a beloved Disney character to do so, goodbye Pinocchio. But watching how close the two friends could be at the beginning of the game, slowly drifting apart because of how their ideals played out in the real world, and then coming back together in order to save the world. It made me cry when I was a kid, and it makes me cry now. Story-wise, Kingdom Hearts also feels much more competent, even though they clearly had ideas that went beyond just the first game. Sora, Riku, and Kairi end up in completely different areas around the world by the end of the first game. And as a 12-year-old, it was devastating to realize I had to play more games to figure out what would happen next. But the story's evolution of discovering the Disney villains, realizing Maleficent was the big bad, and then learning that there was a whole second tier of evil with Ansem, the Seeker of Darkness, incredible. But the way the story works to integrate the Disney world with the overarching storylines is, in my opinion, the best in the series. I'm not sure if it's because Disney had more things they were focused on at the time, I read the book Disney War by James B. Stewart that focused on the history of Disney up until 2003, and truly, they had bigger issues. But for the most part, the worlds felt the most creative we've seen them in throughout the entire series. They range from being similar to the original movie with Sora and Co. brought in to add flavor, such as in Atlantica. But even in Atlantica, I'd argue it'd have more depth, considering King Triton knew about the key bearers, which is something they never really touch upon again. To worlds such as Monstro and Neverland, where, truly, the Disney world is the backdrop to the main plot, and those characters are directly interacting with our main characters, but also directly affecting the game's plot direction. Riku holding up Pinocchio while Geppetto cries for his son, or Sora standing in front of Riku while Captain Hook grouses in the background, is not only fun as a player, but made it worthwhile to go to those worlds instead of feeling like a checklist that the player must deal with. The fact that Monstro is actually an optional world when Sora and Riku team up for the first time boggles my mind, but it really goes to show that every world in this game was doing something unique. There are arguments about the different fighting styles in the games, but for me, Kingdom Hearts is still the best. I think Kingdom Hearts 2 made the fighting too easy with the triangle button, and Kingdom Hearts 3 kind of fixed that, and we will never discuss Chain of Memories. Ever. But Kingdom Hearts 1 promised me a hack and slash game, and by golly, it gave me just that. At 12 years old, all I wanted to do was run up to things and hit X a lot of times and have them explode into money. And now that I am an old, doing that as well brings me just as much joy. Besides, there was nothing more satisfying than beating Riku Ansem upside the head with a Keyblade. And it took so long for me to do so that I have the entire script memorized and can recite it like a party trick. Yoko Shimomura did incredible things with this soundtrack. I really loved how we can watch how the songs evolved over the years, but something about the original soundtrack just hits with me. Besides being beautiful, this was the first thing over $30 I had ever bought. I saved up all my cat-sitting money, and my parents, who had heard me playing this game at 6 a.m. before school, had no idea why anyone would want to listen to the music even more. But every song is just so good. The original Dearly Beloved is a simple, beautiful piano piece that just slaps. But to me, no song is more powerful musically as well as thematically as Hollow Bastion. It is the second original world, and from the moment you land the gummy ship, the way the song ratchets up to warn you that things are getting real is a real slap back to earth. And the way the music fades down as Riku comes into view, so good. In all seriousness, I could sit down and talk about every aspect of the game for hours. About how, almost 20 years after I first played it, there are still things I'm discovering. How fun it is to beat Riku up in the beginning of the game, where I once got a score of 99-0 because I am still mad when he beat me as a child. The beautiful parallels of the characters. I didn't even touch on Simple and Clean, and how it helped me discover the world of Japanese pop music. But Kingdom Hearts was the very first video game I ever played, and beat, all by myself, and I'm so glad it was. It showed me that the music in games could be incredible, that the stories could be deep and meaningful, and fun, and sad, and relatable. That the characters could range from kind to a little malicious but could still grow. Kingdom Hearts might currently have the most bonkers plot, and also might have some issues, but overall, this game was my childhood, and to see that it still holds up on its own 20 years after it first came out really means so much to me. I am a radio show host for a little show called Gameplay Radio on Radio Free Brooklyn, where I and my co-host play tabletop role-playing games over the air Sundays at 2 p.m., and later wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on Twitter at GameplayRFB. I also have a weekly newsletter, which you can find at my Twitter at CuteBookworm10, 10, not the word 10, where I talk about things that I have found interesting throughout the week. Or if you want to talk more about Kingdom Hearts, you can chat with me there. Happy gaming!
Nostalgia is one of the strongest forces in the human psyche and is responsible for the continued existence of some of our favorite fandoms. From the minds behind the Dole Up in Dreams podcast and Isolation Cast Voices from Quarantine, Saturday Morning Confidential takes you on a deep dive into the properties that helped influence the artists and creators of today. So whether you are a Goonie, a Gem Girl, a Digi-Destined, or you just want to return to Oz, new episodes release on Fridays bi-weekly starting January 1st of 2021, and join us on the Wednesdays after the main show for the Serial Killer Radio Hour, where we sit down with the people responsible for the toys, shows, and fandoms that you love. Now you can find Saturday Morning Confidential at certainpov.com/SMCpod or on your favorite podcast platforms. So don't forget to tune in for another deep dive into the files of Saturday Morning Confidential.
CPOV.
CertainPOV.com.